Welcome back to Market Monday for October 6, 2025, the video series where I go through the market so that in future releases, we've got kind of an idea of how it's going to work. So let's hop into it. All right, let's start first with icons like we always do. In terms of total items, we've got 76, which is up from 67 last week, but it's staying right around the same range in terms of total icons on the market. In terms of icons that are under 50,000 coins, it's just Joe Thornton's that are left. Everything else is now above 50,000 coins, which means that they are slowly going up in price. Now, Fedorov, who was one of the main icons at launch of the game, is now up to about 122,000 coins. Last week, he was just around 100. So again, we're seeing a steady incline of Sergei Fedorov, which makes sense. I was waiting for this for a few weeks now, but he is one of the best cards in the game, and I think it was just so many people that pre-ordered the game early on had Fedorov, so any of the ones that were tradable you could get pretty cheap because everyone kind of had him. But now we're at a point where all of the free-to-play players and standard edition players that didn't get Fedorov with the pre-order, they're all now trying to buy him, and he's up for about 122,000 coins. Same thing goes for Solani, who's about 130,000 coins. Again, this is a steady incline. We're seeing 120,000 from last week. And again, Solani is the same thing as Fedorov, one of the best cards in the game. And now you're seeing players that did not get him with the free pre-order pack. Now you're paying, a much higher price. I also want to note Paul Coffey, who ended up being released with the worldwide launch, is now well over 200,000 coins. I got him tradable for about 130,000 coins about 2.5 weeks ago. So we're seeing a massive increase here. And again, I think it's because he's just one of the best cards in the game. And there's really no other cards that could come out that are going to knock him down off your roster. So it's kind of a safe one during the long first season. But he's now well over 200,000 coins. And the same thing goes for Joe Sakic, who is in the high 200, low 300,000 coins. He's a part of one of the best line combos. So if you find an icon that is good for line combos, it's just going to continue to increase. So Joe Sakic, as well as Paul Coffey, huge increases. Now, when it comes to making the icons, 83 to 85 overall alumni are required. And last week, they were going for under 25,000 coins. It has gone back up again. We're seeing 83 and above icons now up for 28,000 coins, which is a pretty big jump. So 3,000 per, which means to make one of the icons, you're going to need to spend about 140,000 coins in value to make one, which is a big jump from the 125,000 coins just last week. Now, you can make 83 overall alumni by trading in 81 or 82s. And again, these are seeing a steady increase as well. They were 7,500 coins last week, and you can get a few for 8,000, but it looks like about 8,500 is going to be the cost that you're going to have to get a bunch at. And at that price point, it will cost you about 25,000 coins in value to make one this route, which would be a few thousand coins cheaper than just going out and buying the 83s. When it comes to the heroes, another huge drop-off in just the amount on the market. I don't know why these are not pulled at all. There was 37 total on the marketplace last week. This week, there's only 22. And when it comes to being under 50,000 coins, that's down as well because the only ones that weren't were Naslund and Shara. But now cards like Rob Blake are well over 60,000 coins as well. Even Alesh Hemsky has jumped up over 55,000 coins. So heroes are very odd, but they're staying in that like 40 to 60,000 coin range roughly. And there just is not a lot on the market at all. Now, you can make them with 81 overall alumni. This week, it's going to cost you about 42,000 to make one if you were buying all of the items off the auction house. Alternatively, you can make them with the 79 or 80 overall alumni. And just like all of the other alumni cards, these are jumping up in price as well. As it stands, you're looking at about 3,500. So another 500 coins per 79 or 80 overall alumni. So it just kind of falls in line with all of the icons and alumni cards just slowly going up in price. Now, the Marquee event is still going on. It was a weaker event. It didn't have a lot of cards that went into line combos. There were a few decent cards, but there was not any like must-haves. When it comes to the 82 to 84 overall just event items, these have actually cratered in price because last Monday, there wasn't any up for less than 20,000. Now you can get 82 event items for like 12,000 coins, which is a drastic drop-off. However, 82 overalls, they actually went up in price. You need 2 of them to make a Master Set player item. These are now up to 8,000, up 1,000 from last week. You could get an 82 for 7K, which means that to just buy these cards off the auction house to make a Master Set player item, it's only going to run you 52,000 coins to make an MSP. So for an event that is not exciting, these prices do drop considerably. Now, I do want to point out that there is no line combo yet. EA waited until the last day of the Check My Game event to add in a line combo specifically for that event. I'm curious to see next week if EA drops one of these line combinations, what it does to the event items. So I'll be sure to pay attention to that for the next Market Monday. Now, you can also make the event items by trading in 78 to 79 overall cards. These seem to fluctuate a ton because 78s are now going for 1,500. Last week, they were 17. And earlier when Fantasy came out, they went up to like 2K. So the low-end barrier for entry cards seem to fluctuate a ton, probably because we pull the most of them. So that would be my guess. Now, when it comes to total MSPs on the auction house, there was only 10 last week. Obviously, with week 2 being released, there's now 26, so it's more than doubled. And again, this was not a strong event, but you can actually get a few of them for well under 100,000 coins. Last week, you were looking at 160,000 to get any of them. So a big drop off here if the cards don't fit like a line combo. Now we're into the last day of the fantasy event. Again, one of the most egregious costing events we've ever had. The barrier for entry for the event was 80 overall items, and these have gone up in price. Last week, they were 2,400 coins. You're looking at just above 3,000 coins now to get an 80 overall. I think it's probably because people are being very desperate because the event is about to end, so they're trying to buy as many as they can to finish off the last few collectibles. That's a major increase. That's 600 more coins, so I think if you just had the base requirements for the fantasy event, if you waited until the last day, you're probably going to make a killing because everyone gets really desperate. When it comes to 82 overalls, which is required for the next set, you can get some for just around 8,000 coins. That's 1,000 coins less, so a pretty big drop there. However, 81s jumped up to 4,900. Again, about 1,000 coin increase from the prior week. So a mixed increase in prices. A lot of it might have to do with our second Chel Week event that's dropping for the launch of the NHL season. So the Chel Week will only be available for 4 days, essentially, up till Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And it requires 3 Chel Week player items, as well as 82 to 84 overall items. Now, in terms of Chel Week cards that are available, there is just not a lot. There's only 13 total on the auction house, and basically the cheapest one is about 33,000 coins. You can get these cards in packs that are choice packs, as well as random trade-in sets. But on the auction house, they're quite expensive. They are necessary for objectives, though. And then you also need 82 to 84 overall items. So again, it gets quite costly to make it without using untradeable stuff that they give you. This is the last week I'm going to show these. These are the popular cards from the very first week of the game because of the line combos. Troy Terry essentially held his value the entire time. He was 45,000 coins last week, which was up a little bit from the prior, and he's like 35,000 coins. So if there is a good card for a popular line combo, I think next year it's safe to assume that that card will just hold its value regardless. The same thing goes if that player gets a increased event item. Troy Terry has an 86 overall as well. It was 150,000 coins last week, and the cheapest one right now is about 130. McTavish is finally seeing his price drop quite a bit. You can get him for about 15,000 coins now. This is down from 24,000 the week prior. So when you start to see some cards kind of fall in price that aren't the main ones for a line combo, those will drop in value quite rapidly. Teuvo Teravainen is continuing to see a small decrease in value. He's now down to 33,000, which I think is a good value. There's even one up for under 30 that hasn't sold yet. So we're starting to see a slow decline in price for Teuvo Teravainen. There's also a lot of options for Blackhawks or the Finn if you are trying to make that Blackhawk Finn line. Okay, this one's pretty big. So McDavid last week was 300,000 coins, but I want to talk about today specifically for Connor McDavid. There's now 21 up on the auction house, and this is way up in terms of the total that were available. Last week, there was only 12, and the big reason is because he just signed his contract, so everyone anticipates a transaction McDavid to come out, so everyone's panic selling. I'm curious to see where his price lands, but because there's so few just available, there's only 20 available, and not everyone has Connor McDavid. It's very hard to get him. I'm very curious to see where his price falls in at, but right now, we're seeing about 290, 300,000 coins, so his price really hasn't changed that much, but if he does get a new transaction card, I'll be very interested to see what his price of his base card falls to. Now, Draisaitl was 60,000 last week, and his price dropped a little bit. It is also of note that he's getting a new 85 overall MSP during the Chel Week, so I anticipate that this will fall quite a bit because there will probably be a free option of Draisaitl that you can go and get. When it comes to Nathan McKinnon, his price has gone up yet again. He was 215,000 last week, up from 200,000 the week before. again, when it comes to the high-powered base cards, unless they have a brand new card come out, their price will just hold, and eventually as more people play, that'll be the card they chase after, so their floor is very safe. So Nathan McKinnon's gone up in price. Now, Cale Makar, he slowly is starting to lose some value as well. He was about 70,000, but there is some up that are in the 60s, but it's right around that same price point, but he is starting to see some cheaper cards. And Kucherov is actually seeing a bit of a rebound. He got all the way down to 35,000 coins last week. They're still up a few around 35, but you're starting to see a lot in the 40s. It's just crazy because they need a line combo regardless of how good the player is. Unless they're exceptional, like Nathan McKinnon or Connor McDavid, unless they get a line combo that gives them a big boost, like 5 AP or +2 overall, things like that, it really impacts their value. I did also want to point out with the fantasy cards, before I forget, there is only 34 on the auction house right now, and only 11 of them are under 1 million coins. And just to put this in perspective, 1 million coins in this game is worth like 1.8 to 2 million in the prior years because there's so few ways to earn specific amounts of coins. So these are just insane prices that no one's ever going to buy a card for. So I'm curious to watch this as the season is about to start. We're a day away from opening night. So I'm very curious to see cards that don't score in the first week. Maybe the hype dies down a little bit. How quickly the fantasy cards will fall in price. Next, looking at Team of the Week. So we're waiting for the first star of the month, assuming that's coming. Last week, you could get Slavkovsky for 55,000. Now there's just a couple up for 60. When it comes to Mitch Marner, he's at about 85,000 coins per. And there's literally no Pedersen's up. He was up for 130,000 coins last week. He's one of the more important cards in terms of line combos. So it just goes to show how important line combos are in terms of the market. The card just doesn't exist anymore because you can't make him. We're seeing a massive drop in 82 overall Team of the Week items. However, you need 5 of these to make an 85. Last week, there were 12,500 per. Now there's a bunch up for 10,000. This one's up for 9,100. Again, that would mean you could make a Captain Team of the Week card for 50K. Very curious to see what happens once a Star of the Month comes out because usually they require all of the Captain cards that were released, which should heavily impact the market when it comes to these. Now, lastly, we take a look at the total amount of items in the auction house. Last week, there was 17,802. This week, we're only down 500 items, so nothing crazy there. It looks like it's settling into around 17,000 cards, but not a big change. That's going to do it for this week's Market Monday. Stay tuned to next Monday as we go over and see all the impacts after the fantasy event is over. I'll see you guys then.